So Robert Mueller has handed in his report or his investigation. He's ended the investigation into President Donald J. Trump of the United States of America for supposed Russia collusion. Supposedly, the situation was that President Donald J. Trump and people in his presidential campaign might have colluded with Russia and Putin and interests in Russia in order to make him the president of the United States of America. So this is big things. I mean, just in general, with this whole thing, some people was wondering, do you want this to be true? Do you actually want this to be what's actually happened? Wouldn't you be happy if it hadn't happened? Or do you just completely dislike this man so much that you wish that would have happened so somebody else could come in? Because I understand people being surprised that Donald Trump got in. But there's going to be a lot more information about that. That just recently happened. I'd rather wait to talk about it a little more once there's actually more information about the actual report. I don't think there's going to be much in there, but I'm back to this. There's some other things that have happened, I think, around this that I'd like to talk about. Recently, there was this executive order that Donald J. Trump signed saying that he's going to stop funding schools, higher schools of institutes of higher learning, the colleges and universities in the United States of America, if they don't defend or create an environment that is pro freedom of speech, because they've had this for a while where they're actually going in there and conservative voices or people who are not just ultra progressive. I don't like using ultra progressive, just people who aren't saying the things that they think should be said at schools. You look at the actual people in schools and you see like 90% of the people who are political are Democrats who have funded or have donated to Democratic candidates and things like this. It's pretty clear that the schools themselves are just very liberal and on the political left. Now, another thing that's added in that is the discrediting of actual, oh, my educated people voted for this and that. And I talked about this in a previous video about, okay, when you think about what educated people are, what should that matter about what they voted for? I mean, it's something that's been constantly discredited, and I think this is kind of a situation where we're seeing how schools themselves have been neutered. These factories of brainwashing and just creating more and more just liberal automatons, progressive automatons that just don't have any critical thinking about them. They just toe the party line. And I think a lot of people were actually brainwashed by this and are waking up to this. And I think that's a positive thing. I think there's going to be a lot more effect of this. You're not going to see that much coverage of it because, first of all, the funding thing, if government funding has already been given towards a school, that funding is still going to go through. They need to figure out, okay, which schools are not doing what are the guidelines, what funding is going to be cut back. So it's going to take a while, but I think this is already going to start changing the landscape of schools in general, and they're going to start doing some things proactively to try and roll this back. And every year there's more and more kids coming through these things. There's more and more kids going to apprenticeship, going to online learning, going to alternate forms of things. So it's a morphing environment, and I think things are going to change around that. I have some separate videos talking about education, about how they could be some kind of thing where you're working with somebody and then they actually get some of the costs of you going to school, and then you sign some kind of contract saying you're going to work with them for the first 3 years after you graduate, or you work with them over the 4 years. So you have school where you're taking more specific classes for your course. You're not taking like general studies and things like that. You're taking more specific to your actual field, and then you can be maybe half a day at the office, half a day at the school, or the schools themselves will be kind of factories or office kind of environments where the work you're doing in school is directly contributing to your actual job and things like this. There's many other ways these things can be done, and I think that's a positive thing. I thought that was one of the pluses of having somebody who's a disruptor like Donald Trump in there. Now, the media itself is very discredited. The media has been talking for a long time. A lot of people in the media have been talking about how sure they are that there's some collusion out here. And I think people in the actual Democratic Party, they know. They know where this thing came from. They know the Steele dossier was a Hillary Oppo kind of research piece. They know that President Obama and people in his administration were involved in this whole thing. So they know these things. Nancy Pelosi didn't say, oh, we shouldn't go with impeachment out of just jest. She knows what's going on. And so they're kind of like, okay, let's not do this. We also have to deal with these upstart new politicians like Alexander Ocasio Cortez and these other people. And so I think they're just going to pivot to the election. But anyway, so the media itself, I think, is discredited again after the different hoaxes, the Jussie Smollett hoax, the Covington school saying the Covington kid was actually like offensive towards this kid when it turns out it was the whole deal was different. So the continued discrediting of the media. Now, and in Hollywood, which is another big part of controlling actual socio-political, just the culture and the climate in the country. Hollywood is literally gesturing and having their they're gesturing and just being high on the fumes of their own feces. That's what they're doing right now. And I think no one is really taking these people as serious as they have been. So in this environment, I think that's prime ground that the gatekeepers of information and shaping young minds and shaping just not just young minds, shaping the minds of the American people. I think when these people have been taken down, it's now opening up more free speech. People are going to be looking for information from other places because I think in general, most people really did trust the media. They really did trust these sources and thought they were being on the board, reporting actual news instead of just opinion and bias and things like this. So it's good to have that information out there. And I think it's prime ground to make the case for liberty and making a certain America great again. And I think with making America great again, it's not limited to the United States of America. I've talked about this in some videos. I've had a global background somewhat, and I think globalism itself has a negative connotation to some people, and I think that negative connotation is partially because of the state-driven nature of the current globalist environment. But the whole idea of the things, the world being a global place, us being a human race, and understanding we are Earthlings and having an identity of that Earthling thing, I think that's something that's coming. Trade already is that way. Information, there's no real boundary to the information and the things we get. I'm recording this in Nairobi, Kenya, on a phone that I bought in the United States of America that was designed somewhere in California, but it was built in China, and then it was assembled in XYZ. And the internet I'm doing is going this Wi-Fi to this router and then being converted into zeros and ones, and then through electrical signals, it's going on an undersea cable and sometimes being beamed into like space on a satellite and back to Earth. All these things are from so many different places, so many different people coming together. So in that nature, in that sense, I think globalism is coming. I'd go as far to say that someone as well traveled and well experienced as President Donald J. Trump does also understand, have a idea of the Earth as himself as part of an Earthling. Sure, he's the president of the United States, but the United States is part of this whole global community. And I think a lot of things that happen in the United States are copied and duplicated in other places. And I still do think the United States has the possibility to be a leader in liberty and change, and even just the whole idea of white and black. If you really think about these two terms, they're uniquely American terms because people have, from different reasons, yes, the Europeans in general mostly just left the country that they were because there were issues there. A lot of the people in the African American community, the black community in the United States of America, have ancestry to the slavery time, so they were removed from Africa in different consequences. But ever since then, there's been subsequent levels of immigration into the country. Those people have come together, gotten this different identity. Because you go back to Europe, you come here in Africa, and this whole idea of black is not really here in Africa. This whole idea of white isn't really there in Europe. They still have the separations. But I think there is an ability to have this melting pot, to have this idea that we've come from different places, we have similar interests, we're in a similar location, we can come together and do X, Y, Z. And I still think that America really does have the chance to be a world leader in that, an example. And yeah, just let me know what you guys think about the Mueller thing, about the things that I said here. Do you think these things are going to be overlooked, or do you think I'm correct with kind of looking at the environment of these things? Because coming up, I think Trump's going to get in again on 2020, of course, because he's an incumbent. I don't think the Democrats are going to put somebody together enough to actually combat what he's doing, and they don't have the defense of the media. They don't have an incumbent. They don't have the Hollywood pushing them back. Hollywood isn't as trusted and believed. The media isn't as trusted as believed. I think people coming through schools are getting more suspicious of what the actual education system is doing to these people. People are more aware about some of these things. And yeah, so that's it for now. Now, just a little more about my thoughts about Mueller, my initial thoughts, and what's going to happen after, what I'd like to see happen. Some people, they'll say that the 40 million or however much was spent on this Mueller investigation, 2 years, lost opportunities, because there could have been relations and things done. For example, as I mentioned, there's a lot of people Trump could have appointed or fired to get what he wanted to do done ahead of time, ahead of the time that's been done now. There's a lot of man hours and things like that spent on this. There's a lot of people who may have reached across the aisle or just decided to work with Trump, but this question mark was out there. So yeah, there's those things. But when you look at it, right now, this has happened. Mueller is somebody who people on the left said was beyond reproach. So now you're going to look who's now questioning Mueller. If he truly is beyond reproach, if that report comes out and it truly was just by the books, he followed the evidence and found nothing, then you have a situation where some people who truly believed Trump may have been colluding with the Russians, because a lot of people, including myself when I first heard this, like, there's no way Trump could win. I got hopeful that he could, rather after a couple of months, after a couple of the primaries, like, wait, he'd actually get in, he could actually do a lot of things, mostly just, as I mentioned in this video, taking down these institutions that keep people ignorant. I think it's a positive that more people talk about politics, because I think politics are important, and I think Trump has achieved all these things already. But now that he's in, there's going to be people who look at the Mueller thing and say, okay, he has been vetted more than pretty much any president that we've ever seen. So now they might actually say, we might not like him as a person, but he's legitimately in there. Another thing is, you look at the people who will now pivot and say, let's go to the courts in New York, or let's get these other people in there. So the people who continue the more Russia thing, you can now see these people, and it's more evidence that some people just don't really care about the truth. They just dislike Trump, and those are the people I think at this point I can also say, I'm not going to be able to reach these people. I'm not going to be able to communicate with these people. These people have an ideology. He's the devil to them. They don't really want things to work. And the other people, you can kind of say, okay, yeah, now that you thought these people were telling you the truth, you thought there was a chance, and now that there isn't, would you want to actually have things work? What are the best ways to go forward from now? So I think when you look at it that way, then this whole situation, this whole $40 million, this whole 2 years, I think was worthwhile for that thing. I mean, it's a long process, but I think when you look at politics, it's a long run thing. Things don't change overnight. Rome wasn't built in one day, and the establishment isn't going to crumble in one day. I don't think the whole idea of liberty, building a better country, a freer country, making America great again, or what have you, that's not going to be done overnight. But now, I think this is a good step. I think there's some positives that can come out of that time being spent. And now going forward, what's there to do? Do you sit in, and the memes are going to be crazy this week, do you sit in and rub this in on people's face? Do you laugh at Rachel Maddow literally crying about this thing? So, oh, literally. She was snuffled up. I mean, I didn't see her literally crying, so let me not say that. But she looked like she had been. She was very upset. So now, do we rub it into these people's faces? Or do people who supported Trump now reach out a hand and say, okay, look, we supported him because we may not like him as a person, but we understood he got in a valid way, and we're not just going to sit here and be salty. If we want to give him opposition, we'll oppose him on a more just and factual level versus just making up these things. I don't know.